Seis začít.
Okay, so I think we're good to begin. So, hello, thank you for joining this Q&A. We are powered by Redstone, a small team from the Czech Republic, and recently we got into contact with the Delta Force, who have been kind enough to agree to join this Q&A. So I think we can start by letting them introduce themselves and tell them something about their team.
Yeah, we're gonna introduce each other first. So the three of us that are in this call, and then we'll go on to talk about the team a bit. So hi, I'm Raul. I'm a programmer in the team. This is actually my first year of FTC, and I'll let the others introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Radu. I'm in the technical department. This is also my first year in this team, and my job is to build and 3D project the robot.
Hi, I'm Adrian. I'm a programmer in this team, and this is also my first year in this team.
All right. So can I share a screen? Just
Of course.
okay. I'll just share the website a bit so I can actually talk over something. All right. So we're a team of 13 people currently. 13 students, that is, and 2 mentors. We're from Romania, and we're from a city in the west of the country called Arad, some like a 100,000 people city. We belong to the National College of Computer Science. That's the name of the school that hosts us. And yeah, as was just said in the introduction, we recently won Worlds in the Freight Frenzy season. We're eagerly awaiting your questions.
Okay, well, thank you for introducing yourselves. I think that first we will probably start by asking a few questions from us, and then we can move on to letting the other teams ask some questions as well, of course. So, yeah.
So I'd like to start by asking you, how did you start as a team, as an organization?
So pretty much the team was founded by our current captain, which was in his first year of FTC. He moved on from the team he was in beforehand and created the current Delta Force team, if I recall correctly, in 2018. So that was kind of the beginning of the whole team.
Okay, so how is your team history? How would you describe, like, how old is the team?
Well, I guess the team for Romanian teams is relatively old. We've got quite a nice sort of come up and progression. So each year we did more and more. For example, yeah, last year the only international competition we attended was MTI. We didn't attend Worlds. Well, we couldn't, but we didn't. And yeah, I think it was a very nice progression throughout the years, and now we've gone to win Worlds.
Yeah, I would like to ask, how would you describe the experience of the World's Championship? Is it somehow different from competitions in Romania?
Well, yeah, you have to first start about talking about the absolute size of the competition. So Romanian nationals aren't that big. It's not 160 people. It's definitely not that much. It's about, I think, 57 teams attended the nationals this year. Um, so it was a huge difference going from a competition that, let's say, had about a couple hundred students to one that literally had more than 1,000 students in the same sort of convention center. Um, it was way more stressful. because even though we had high hopes, it was sort of this just nonstop work atmosphere. We never really caught breaks, not even during the lunch break. Uh, Quals were different. In nationals, we played 6 qual matches, not 8. So it was a bit more relaxed back then. But yeah, it was a whole new experience, just meeting new people, especially from other countries. And I loved when we got people from other teams coming to our pit, um, say from like, I don't know, India, Libya, or whatever, and just coming to our pit and asking us stuff and getting to interact with them. I think that was just a sort of an enhancer to the whole experience.
Okay, what would you say was your biggest edge over the other teams?
So I think what mattered most this year, at least to us, and what helped us most was consistency. I've heard a lot of talk about people saying that we had a relatively simple robot, and yeah, that's what we went for because we wanted something simple and efficient. Ultimately, we actually got to that, which was amazing for us, but we had a lot of driver practice, which in the end is why we were able to get high scores consistently. And also why we were able to respond to situations really fast. For example, in one of the finals matches, I think it was when Brainstormers was playing defense against Upper Creek, our main driver actually saw that coming and sort of pushed up a creek so we could gain that advantage and break their defense. So I think that sort of stuff, like strategizing and driver practice, was what actually won us worlds.
Okay, so coming to Worlds, what were your expectations? Did you actually, when coming to the tournament, expect to place this high, or was it like a complete surprise for you?
So, uh, funny story. When we landed and we got to our hotel in Houston, we actually had this little encounter with a hotel staff, and he asked me, "So, are you guys gonna win?" And the first thing I said was just, "We hope so." And he then said, "No, you're gonna win," like telling me that I have to say we're gonna win. So going into it, I don't think I don't think we had expectations. We had expectations to at least win the division. I don't think we had expectations to win worlds as captain. We thought we were gonna be first or second pick, not captain. So kind of turned the situation upside down a bit.
Okay, so I think now if any of the other teams want to ask you anything, I think they can definitely have some space now.
So what do y'all do for any outreach projects, like in the community and stuff?
So in our local community, we usually do workshops. That was like one of the main things we've done throughout the year was getting children from our school, especially the younger ones, to our workshop, and then we'd have a bunch of activities that involve. So, say we've had recycling involved at one point, and we've had a an employee, actually a CEO of a nearby recycling company, come to our school and teach them about that sort of stuff. We also had quite a big history throughout the pandemic of helping the community. We 3D printed a lot of like face masks for doctors in hospitals because the supply just wasn't big enough. So we would put all our 3D printers together and get that stuff done, and we donated to the hospital. Um, so pretty much, we also did a lot of mentoring other FTC teams, especially because sadly in Romania, and I'm pretty sure in other regions as well, there's no such thing as a special education sort of division of FTC, because there just aren't that many schools that are special education that attend FTC competitions. We try to mentor the a local team from a special education high school, and get them on track and sort of help them as much as we can, because obviously it's kind of sad to see them try so hard and not really win that much. Um, we don't just help in the local community. We've had a lot of encounters with teams outside of the country, even, where we help them with several things like just coding stuff or any questions they have. We, through our sponsors, started talking to a team in Ukraine, because our sponsor has about four factories. Our main sponsor, Aptiv, has about four factories in that area. And through them, we talked a bit. That was before everything that happened. Um, and in the country, we usually try to help teams that have less opportunity, maybe less sponsors, with parts. We send them parts or cables or whatever they really need. All they have to do is just ask us through messages. So that's kind of what we've been doing over the years.
Cool.
You said one of the biggest parts that made your robot really good was not the design, but a lot of the drive practice. You said you specifically made your design simple, but you had a lot of practice, which helped. How do your drivers practice, and how do they structure their practices? Do they practice with anything other than just the robot?
So that was maybe a bit of a misunderstanding. I didn't really say the design wasn't what helped us. It did actually help. We were trying to design something. I said simple and efficient. So that was kind of the main point. So we wanted something that was, efficient in the collection and depositing, um, which means quite a lot of things to take into consideration. Because, for example, I've heard a lot of people on the Discord say, um, that it's kind of really weird how side outtake robots could lose to a pass through
Yeah.
robot like ours. And we've heard this quite a lot, but I think that's actually quite plausible, because a robot, not only is it pretty fast, um, the pass through design really allows for a lot more accuracy. So in the later stages of the game, you'd see our main driver, do quite a lot of interesting maneuvers, like purposefully tip the shipping hub just so he can stuff more cubes, or stuff cubes in a very small sort of open area, because they'll know they'll push out when they fall out of the deposit. So it just offers us more flexibility. So that's why, yeah, our design did still help. But when it comes to driver practice, we usually just had days where we would do driver practice, and usually that would also lead us to spotting a bit of some stuff like bugs or whatever. So we'd do like almost a real match. Unfortunately, we didn't have two robots or more, so we could test actual real matches. But we do just solo matches. We'd find the issues in our robot design and our code. We try to improve them. That also helped. And yeah, that was just like the key. We just played regular matches. There wasn't necessarily any intricate structure to it. It was just plain practice.
Did y'all ever do any scrimmages with other teams in your area to like simulate a real match?
In Romania, actually, there are quite a few demos, and also it's really easy to travel to a demo, because country is not that big. So we've had quite a bit of demoing going on. Unfortunately, only one demo was physical, so the rest were virtual because at the time we still had some pandemic laws. But yeah, we did do that to try to simulate. That's actually why we went to a physical demo.
How do y'all manage like fundraising and everything throughout your team?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Because didn't quite
How
hear.
do you, oh, sure. How do you manage fundraising throughout your team, like fundraising for your robot and everything that you need to do?
Oh, fundraising. Okay, I didn't catch that the first time. So when it comes to fundraising, we actually have an association that's like the head of the association is the team captain. Through that, we get public funds, so we can request funds from the town hall and or like the sort of municipal center for culture, and they open up projects and we can get public funding from those projects essentially. And also our sponsor, so Aptive, and our all of our other sponsors, but mainly Aptive, we receive quite a lot of support from them. They're active even in the US, and I know for a fact in, I think, Michigan, uh, regionals in FRC, they literally had a field named the Aptive Field because it was sponsored by them. And yeah, their Romanian sort of headquarters is active as well in the um, in the area of FTC, and currently sponsors two teams in the country that I know of, us and another team from a nearby city.
How do y'all find your sponsors
Uh,
or like get connections?
so we have a lot of like social media interaction, um, and we are really active there because we are always trying to expand it, and that usually either gets the attention of the sponsors or gives us a platform to get the attention of the sponsors when we actually talk to them. Also, events are like a really good place because if there's a sponsor that's really interested in robotics, they'll usually come to an event. That's actually how we met Aptive at an event at the regionals. And just direct communication as well. We have, so our marketing division deals with this stuff most, and they prepare presentations for our team. And we just send those presentations to other companies in the hopes that they'll like it enough, and they'll see our results to where they'll think it's worth for them to sponsor the team.
Can I ask a question? You mentioned that your drive practice, your driver did a lot of practice. How many practice did your driver do? Like, do you have a quantitative number? It's really amazing that it's a relatively simple design, but you can do it so fast and reliable.
I don't think I have a good estimation of time. It was just a lot of time. So I know for like Maryland, we really wanted to uh, have sort of a good video and get some consistent high point matches. And so before like the Maryland submission, before we started filming for it, we had days where we would do driver practice for 5 6 hours, maybe even more. It depends on the day. One of the days actually was 12 hours, I think. Obviously with breaks in between, but still 12 hours of working and practicing and fixing bugs just on one single day.
Wow, that's amazing. I have another question. How did you, did you use any particular software like a Roadrunner in your autonomous? Your autonomous is pretty fast and reliable for like pass through a robot as well. What's your trick there?
There are quite a few tricks. Yeah, Roadrunner was one of them because we found we found throughout demos, especially in the physical demo, we've seen it in a really bad situation wherein our robot and another team's robot knocked into each other during auto, and Roadrunner was able to easily correct that. And so from that moment on, and actually even before, we really knew that that was probably the way to go with our design. But that's not it. There's also some other things besides just the odometry wheels that we use. We also have faced problems with its accuracy, with the odometry accuracy, because the wheels are actually very close to one another. They're in the back of the robot and they're very, very close, and that makes them lose accuracy. And they're also small. So what we did was we installed like 3 distance sensors, one in the front and 2 on the sides. And through a bit of math, you could take the sensor reading and figure out how far you are from the wall. And that would just let us relocalize. So every time you see the robot score and then enter into the warehouse, when it enters the warehouse, it stops a bit. That's just because um, we want it to be completely parallel to the wall on the side, so that way we get the best sensor reading, and that's when it usually relocalizes and gets a better like localization. And also we found the IMU accelerometer, the one for measuring distance, that doesn't work, but the gyroscope in the IMU, that one works a lot better, and we could use it for relocalization when we lose heading. So that's what we started doing for a while, and that's why it's pretty reliable each and every single time.
When you choose using odometry, I remember your odometry is not liftable, right? It always hit the ground. So that means there is a trade-off of that you cannot cross the barrier, or very hard to like cross barrier. Why did you choose that trade-off? Like, do you worry about if somebody block your entries, then you like what will you do then at that time?
So it's not actually that much of a problem because the only limitation that the odometry gives us is we can't go backwards over the barriers, but we can still go forwards, and with relatively low speed. We've actually done it in worlds, I think in qualifiers, when someone played defense. Um, so that's not that big of a problem. It just offered us the accuracy that driving coders couldn't, um, because driving coders have less ticks per revolution, but also one of the issues was if you want to make a robot that goes through the gap, and your robot, like ours, is almost the size of the gap. So ours was like not even half an inch less than the gap. um, you'd have to push in the wall into the wall just to be safe that you're sort of gonna clear the gap and go through it. But with drive encoders, if we did that, it would think we went outside the field. So we just used odometry, and it didn't really make much of a trade-off because we can still perform pretty well even if someone plays defense over the gap.
Can you explain how the odometry can, with odometry, you can still drive over the barrier from forward action?
Uh, yeah. So our center of mass on the robot is a bit to the it is a bit on the front. So when the odometry hits the barrier, the horizontal odometry doesn't have that much weight on it, but also it's spring tensioned. So it's actually got a really easy time going up. It doesn't have a problem when going up.
I see, thanks.
No problem.
I have another question about your the drivetrain. I remember in the Beyond the Bot interview, you mentioned actually you had multiple versions as well, like for drivetrain or like certain mechanism. And why did you choose this design over other designs? And what's the cons and pros there?
Sorry, can you repeat what design? What did we say we had? Because
At the word, the interview, we see that you mentioned you also have like 6-wheel and other like drivetrain.
Oh yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Like, but you end up choosing this looks very simple design. I'm just wondering the cons and pros when you compare them.
So we talked a bit about it in the video. We somehow found that I think we did at least. We somehow found that the Mechanism version had better acceleration than the 6-wheel. That's probably because of the weight increase, and also it we don't know. So it's just probably the weight increase. So the robot was heavier back then, so it could have been that. The motors were the same. The way we connected the motors to the wheels was the same back then. But also, um, like one of the advantages that Mechanism has over 6-wheel is just the mobility it gave us. And since our drivers are so fast and our robot is relatively lightweight, um, so for how much it has packed on it, um, that was kind of the choice we went with because we wanted something really agile. And funnily enough, even if it's lightweight, it can still hold out in defense. So that's probably why we chose it over 6-wheel drive. Also, 6-wheel drive was way harder to narrow. So our chassis is narrow to where it can pass through the gaps, but the 6-wheel drive version just couldn't. So at the time we switched from 6-wheel to like 6 motors, 8 wheels, because we had suspensions on the wheels to try and get over the barriers, but we couldn't get the suspensions to work well, and the increase in efficiency wasn't large enough, so we just went with Mechanism.
How heavy is the robot? Yeah. And what's your motor you use, drivetrain motor you use?
So I'm not actually sure how heavy the robot is. We haven't weighed it, but I'd wager it's probably, I don't know, less
Like
than
15 kilograms.
yeah,
That's very light.
yeah, like
Yeah.
15 kilos, because it would. I'm saying that because we could fit it onto the
Luggage?
in the luggage at the airport, which is only like 20 something kilograms. So and our motors are 435 rpm motors.
Are you saying your motor is 435 RPM?
Yep.
So that is 13.7 ratio was 1
Yeah.
ratio. Okay.
Yeah. And we don't modify that, so that's the motor ratio, but we have no other like pulleys to modify that gear ratio at all.
That motor is actually pretty fast. In the teleop, did you limit the maximum speed the driver can run, or the driver actually can drive with the max speed of that motor? Because we found that although like it looks your driving is pretty fast, but actually the absolute speed is never very, very high, but your driver just never hit anything, just very smooth. Did you limit the maximum speed so that the acceleration looks better?
No, that's probably him just driving a bit slower to be able to score well. In the code itself, we didn't limit the power to it. There's a couple of things that might have limited power. So in Worlds, one of the bad experiences we've had was the fact that we'd have to sit in the like in it for more than 5 minutes usually, because the presenter would go on to say stuff for 5 minutes, and and our battery level dropped pretty low. So that's maybe one of the reasons. Also, we had a lot of motors on our robot. We had the full motor load on it, so that was like full 8 motors on it, um, and also 6 servos. So it might have been because it drained battery. Uh, I couldn't answer that question definitively, but in the code, no, we didn't limit it.
So, what kind of design process do y'all go through? Like prototyping, CADing? Like, how does that work for y'all?
All right. It seems neither of my colleagues want to answer this one. I was waiting for them. Okay. So, like, what we first go through, we go through like a sketching process or like a brainstorming sort of thing, um, to where we just think up ideas and we try to sketch them on like a notepad or on the whiteboard or whatever, see what comes to mind, see what sounds the best. And then after doing that, we try CADing. That's usually to like test if our ideas are actually practical, if they're actually like if they can be implemented on a robot. And afterwards, after we CAD, if we like the design, if we think it's good, if it shows promise, we do it and we put it on the robot and we test it, and then we just test other designs. That's how we did it in the beginning. I'll give you an example. I'll actually give you two. Our intake, our old intake, back at the start, we actually thought of getting sort of some metal bars and sticking on the end a gecko wheel, like a compliant wheel, because those are really rubbery and they have good grip, and that would rotate and shoot the freight into a deposit. That was a pretty bad idea because it didn't allow you to have like very much control, and it didn't allow you for it didn't allow any error. You had to go straight at the cube or at least get it at a good angle, otherwise it would just spit it in some direction and it won't come to you. And so we settled on our current version of the intake, which is a bit shorter, uses some surgical tubing, and that sort of vectors the freight really well. And the second example would be just our scoring system. So we had a virtual four bar at the beginning, and we found that was quite slow, quite a bit of issues with it. So a four bar for that kind of a robot, it would have to be way more than 18 inches, which isn't a problem because it's diagonal. But the problem is because it's so long, the moment of inertia is huge, and the servos, even torque servos, which we had two of them, and a gearbox, they would have a hard time pulling up the deposit just empty, not even with a cube in. And sometimes if we had a cube that had two weights in it, it would just burn the servos because when it tried to stop, it would really resist the movement of the servos, and they would just power surge and fry themselves. Um, so we settled on this linear slide design. After a bit of brainstorming, we also knew linear slides because a lot of the veteran members of the team that also work in the technical department with assembly and CAD have had a bit of experience with them in back in Skystone. So that's where the idea came from.
Yeah. So do y'all CAD did y'all CAD your entire robot?
Yeah, we actually have a one-to-one of it. I'll put the website in because there's a screenshot there if you want to see, and I'm pretty sure that's the one-to-one version. I don't have the file right now for the CAD, and I don't think I'm not sure if I even have the permission to send it. So that's that.
Right?
So, do you know what kind of CAD software did y'all use, and how long did it take to CAD up the entire robot?
So one of my colleagues will answer this one.
Yeah, so we use Fusion 360, and I don't know how much time we spent on CADing the robot, because I was doing something at the CAD, and the part of the robot was already changing on the robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh, like for the TSC mechanism,
Mhm.
I changed it like 3 times to
Yeah.
get the final version.
So, have y'all always used Fusion 360, or have y'all done anything with SolidWorks?
Um, we tried to use OnShape with the new members because it's a little bit easier to learn. But then we moved to Fusion.
Yeah, we can add no, we are from the Technova team. We found Fusion is much better for the team, multiple members to change the card, share the card. SolidWorks is more of like a single machine, so it's much harder to work when you have multiple people want to change or like create things.
Thank you.
I have another question for the intake. Does your intake the way you put a noodle there? Did you use did you design the how you mount the intake yourself, or it is more like looks very similar to OP take, like that open source somebody has that kind of design. Can you talk more about like how exactly you put that intake there?
No, so that was actually all catted by our team. It was designed by our team. We've had this intake, I think, since probably somewhere October, November. So we've had this intake for a long time. We've gone through a lot of iterations for it, but it was all of it was done by our technical team, and I've never heard anything about taking inspiration from other places. So
I'm curious. What kind of iteration is you have gone through for that intake? Because at the end of the day, the intake looks very simple. We also tried to like improve the intake, but your intake is definitely much more efficient and fast.
So we had quite a bit of problems with getting an intake to work. So I already talked about the first iteration, but when we had the first of the sort of family of intakes that now converged into our current intake, the first one we found was causing problems because it was way too long. It was long, and the fact that it was long made it so that, again, if we came at cubes from an angle, it would just shoot them to the side of the robot instead of into the robot. And so we had to sort of install some guiding panels that were plastic. Those didn't work quite well. The cubes would lose a lot of speed bouncing off of them because they were not hard surfaces. They would absorb a lot of energy. Um, so a lot of iterations. We tried a lot with surgical tubing placement. So whether we should place, we had multiple rows of surgical tubes, and we've tried a lot of placing them in different spots on the rows, whether in the middle or evenly spaced or outwards, to sort of see what brings cubes best to the front of the robot. Um, Also, the tubing itself got some changes. At first, we were only using surgical tubes, but now we're using surgical tubes with some insulation that's used for grounding wires, like shrink tubing that's used for grounding wires. So the kind of stuff you literally have to use a torch, like a blowtorch, on to make it shrink. And that made the tubing a lot stiffer, and that actually made it launch cubes way better into the front of the robot.
Can you talk more about what you put into the noodle to make it more stiffer?
So we put
What is that?
we took I don't have shrink tubing on me right now, but we took our tube, which was sort of don't know what I could call the material. It was just a soft, like plastic tube,
Yeah,
silicone tube,
yeah, the surgical tubing.
and we just over it we put some shrink tubing, which is usually used to put over wires so it insulates them.
Uh-huh.
And that when you heat up shrink tubing, so it like shrinks when you heat it up. And because it because we heat it up with a blowtorch, because that's what you have to do with this more industrial shrink tubing, um it really got tight on the it really got tight on the surgical tubes, and it made them very stiff and gave them like a harder exterior. So now when they hit the cubes, they'd lose much less energy to the cubes. They transfer less, uh, or they transfer more. Sorry, and so cubes would fly faster into the robot.
I see. Yeah, I got it. So you're using those shrinking tube
Yeah.
that used to, like, if you heat, it will shrink. And
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Did you only apply that at the very end of your tube? Is that it's the entire tube has that?
It's the entire tube. So we literally took the entire tube and over it an entire bit of shrink tubing and just heated it up.
Okay, that's very, very cool and interesting trick. You mentioned that initially you also put something like funnel wall to guide it if it is on the side, because we also try that, Did you still have that at the end, or you just remove it with the final tubing?
We removed the funnel because, as I said, the tubing provides somewhat a bit of like vectoring. So when the cube goes in, it sort of automatically is put on the right direction to go into the deposit, into the outtake. So we didn't really need it anymore. And plus, it would, uh, because mechanism wheels sink into the ground a lot, it would drag on the tiles and just make us slower. So it wasn't that great.
How wide is your bucket? Is it your bucket is just a little bit bigger, wider than the freight, or is actually even wider so that you can ensure that you grab this, like no matter left or a little off the center, you can still get them in?
So it's actually it's tapered, so it's like a cone sort of. And so here at the bottom, it's just enough for only a cube to fit in, or a sphere. But at the front, it has a bit of space left, so there's room for error when a cube comes into the intake. So that's kind of how we accounted for, say, if we're not perfectly on the cube. And you can see that in our matches because of the tubing placement, how fast the tubing rotates, and also because of the sort of shape of the deposit. Our driver sometimes picks up freight while strafing. So when he does a strafe and a turn at the same time, sort of going like in a semicircle, he can also pick up freight while doing that, which actually kind of sped up the whole process of getting cubes from the warehouse.
Do you have any problem of getting to flights into the bucket, or your design actually prevent that?
We used to have problems. So one of the problems was at first that the tubing was too long, so it would hit into the bucket. Um, and we fixed that by making the tubing shorter, and that's also one of the problems we had with other versions of the intake. Um, but another problem was now with shrink tubing, with the tubes being so stiff. It meant that if our deposit comes down and it's at too high of an angle, it would sort of come down like this. And if the intake activated just before it got to the intaking position, it would hit it from below, and it wouldn't let the servos push it down all the way. They weren't powerful enough. It would just keep hitting it up. And we fixed that by making the deposit, whenever we retract the slides, we made it go at a very shallow sort of angle, so it would actually come down a bit like this, so it wouldn't have that problem.
So you never have a problem with the intaking two, like worry about you have the two, because your bucket design you can only get one, never get two.
Yeah, and also we made it so that on our robot, we've put a bit of like some like camo paper, sort of. It was just some paper that had a camo that we used on the robot, and that helped because we have motors on the chassis that are exposed, or that would be exposed without the paper, and that would create places for cubes to fall into if anything did happen. And now, if cubes fall into our robot because of the paper, there's no way for them to get stuck, and we just easily get them out of the chassis. So we never have incidents like that either.
Oh, what paper did you use and how you use it? Sorry, I did not get it.
So it's just some paper that we had that on it had like a camouflage. So let me get a picture of the robot. Uh, or actually, yeah, I'll just share my screen.
Okay.
So if you look on our website in the robot pic, so the robot has this sort of camo, this pattern on the side. So there's behind this channel, in the back of the robot, there's a bit of paper there that has the same design on it. That's meant to cover up, and you can even see it there. That's meant to sort of cover up the motors so cubes don't get stuck in our chassis. And it's low friction, so the cubes fly off if we break or anything.
I see.
I'd like to come back to the team organization you mentioned. You said you were divided into departments, so could you please elaborate on that?
Yeah. I'll let my colleague speak for once.
Yes, so we have three divisions. One for programming the robot, one that builds the robot and is making the 3D design for it, and one that includes marketing and outreach part of the team, and PR. I am personally on the programming team, and I have two of my colleagues here. One of them is on the programming too, and one of them is on the technical division.
Do you have any overlap, or where somebody might be in two different areas?
Oh yeah, definitely. So usually the marketing division works on, let's say, like formatting and sort of the writing component. So like writing the engineering portfolio, but they can't do that alone. They have to get sort of some insight from the other divisions so they can go a bit more in depth on the uh, systems of the robot, on the programming, and know if what they've written is okay. So we definitely have people switching back and forth. There's no dedicated person that does two of those things at once, or is like in two departments at once, but we do have quite a bit of overlap. Programming side overlaps a lot with the technical side because obviously we have to give our ideas on stuff like sensor placement or just usual design stuff to make our life a bit easier and make their lives easier in the process. um, we overlap with the marketing side, either on notebooks or Facebook posts. So there's a bit.
So when you do the, you said that you start the design process with sketching and brainstorming. Is that the entire team, or is that just the build team?
Yeah, no, that's the entire team. We don't really sort of push people off to the side just because of their division. What we found is it's very nice to have people that maybe don't have that much of a technical insight into things, because that gives you somewhat of a new perspective, and maybe what they say isn't easy to implement or can't be implemented, but that might give you an idea as to what to look forward to do and what to change maybe in the way that you're thinking about your own design. So nobody gets excluded from the brainstorming process. Everyone has to be on board and everyone has to sort of try and come up with ideas.
So about how many people do you have in each of these divisions?
So currently the programming team is 3 people. That's normal from what I've heard from other FTC teams. Programming teams don't usually have to be that big unless you're doing some bigger stuff like cloud driven stuff for scouting or whatever, but those don't really get involved in the robot process as much. Um, Personally, we all get involved, all of the 3 of us in the programming division and the robot building process. Um, the marketing division, so I can't give you the numbers, I'll just give you off the top of my head. The marketing division, I'm pretty sure has, hold on, let me
4
check.
members.
Yeah,
4.
4 members, and the rest of the 13 members are from the technical division. So yeah, 6 members.
Okay, thank you. So, how much time a week would you say that you usually spend working on the robot or programming, marketing, just like anything related to FTC?
So our schedule, I'd say like pre-December, our schedule was a bit more relaxed. We'd usually be there every day, but maybe we wouldn't sit as much. Just like 2 hours was all we'd do, 2 to 3 hours in the workshop. But afterwards, we ramped up quite a lot because we had a lot of work to do, and all of the time spent in the workshop, usually I'd say about 70% of it is spent working. uh, and that I'm saying that because obviously you have to take a break once in a while. It's just not healthy to work for so long without taking a break. And after December, especially near nationals and worlds, we'd go every day uh, in the morning before school even starts sometimes, and we'd sit there till evening. So I don't know, about 12 hours. Yeah, I guess.
Are you saying you meet every day? Like is that the only in weekend or like including weekday?
No, that was every day, including weekends. Obviously, on the weekends we'd spend a bit less or a bit more time depending on how we felt. But sort of everyone here loves robotics so much that you don't feel 12 hours fly by when you work. And I think a lot of people can relate to it. You just don't feel those 12 hours go by. And we've sort of built this like home away from home and a family away from family uh, between each other, and we love being with each other, being around each other. So that didn't feel like 12 hours. It never felt like it.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of commitment. like every day. And I know why you can win now.
So I'm kind of curious, how does like traveling to Worlds work for y'all? Because I mean, we're a Texas team, so it's like a 3 hour drive up to Houston. Um, so like, how did that traveling work for y'all?
So our final, we had quite a bit of sort of flight hopping, I guess, in the sense that we were searching so much for a good flight because some flights were better. They take short. They like last less, but they didn't give us luggage. We'd have to pay extra for luggage, and the extra amount was actually insane. So we can accept that sort of a deal. Um, so we settled on flying to Houston, but doing a transfer in Istanbul. And that flight, counting the transfer hours in airport, was 15 hours. And to get the robot to Houston, we'd carry it with us, so it went in the luggage of the in the luggage section of the airplane, along with tools and electronics. And it wasn't not a fun time getting through security with batteries on you. I can tell you
Yeah.
that.
How did you pack that robot to travel like that?
So we have. I actually haven't seen any Romanian teams that don't have the 18 by 18 inch, actually a bit bigger boxes. So there's just they're just aluminum boxes, and they have wheels, so they're easier to carry. And we just put padding in the inside, so if anything did happen, um, it wouldn't hurt the robot as much, or maybe not even at all. And actually, it something did happen at one point. Um, so that made it a bit easier to go with the robot. We also bought some specialized carrying containers, so we could get a lot of tools into one box and not have to carry 5 pieces of luggage with tools in them, because that would look quite suspicious.
Once you were at the competition, were there any unexpected hindrances, or was that covered by your extensive testing?
So we prepared quite a lot. We've had, again, as I said in the behind the bot video, sort of the experiences at nationals really shaped how we sort of think about these extreme situations, like failures of whatever components on the robot. So we came quite prepared. We accounted for everything. We got spare parts for almost everything. We 3D printed stuff in advance, because a lot of our bot is 3D printed, especially the scoring mechanism. Um, we did cover a lot of things that went wrong in the nationals. We had made contingency plans, so to speak, if anything did go wrong mid match. Um, so we really fought a lot about stuff like safety and reliability, and also uh, sort of risk. That was one of the biggest problems that we had during nationals, and that was one of the hardest things to fix in that 2 week period between nationals and worlds.
When talking about your Romanian National League, are there any international teams attending?
There were, and unfortunately, it all leads back to the events of February. Um, So we had quite a big tradition of having Russian teams over, two Russian teams especially. Can't tell you the name of the other one because I'm a newer member, but one of them was called Sputnik, and they were really nice people. I actually got to play with them once, and uh, that's sort of the only international teams I can ever recall coming to the national league in Romania. We also went to their nationals too, so it was a mutual invasion. It wasn't just them invading us. It was a bit more friendly than that. But other than them, no. And unfortunately, this year we didn't even get to see them because first, as far as I know, suspended all activity in Russia.
Okay, well, this would just about be an hour. So, does anyone have any final questions that you would like to ask? Anything? Any last questions? Okay, well, if not, then I guess we can end the call. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Delta Force, for agreeing to do this Q&A and to coming and answering all of our questions very well. This whole meeting was recorded, so we will probably at some point compress and upload this video somewhere so that, and then probably send you a link through email or something so that you can access it back. And
Of course. No problem.
I think that will be everything. Thank you all very much for attending. It was great to see you here. And perhaps we'll organize something like this again next year with the next champions, perhaps Delta Force again. So we look to seeing you there.
Thank you for having us. It was a great
Thank you so much.
event.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That's what she did.